Night Wisdom Radio.
There is a particular kind of composure that some people carry, not the composure of someone who has removed themselves from difficulty, or who has been lucky enough to avoid the circumstances that test a person most severely, but the composure of someone who has been in the middle of those circumstances, who has felt the full weight of them, and who has remained through all of it, somehow fundamentally themselves. You may have encountered this quality in someone, a person who received genuinely difficult news and processed it without collapse, who was under real pressure and remained clear and present, who was criticized or challenged or undermined, and did not shrink or lash out or lose their thread, but simply continued with the same steadiness they had before, as though the ground beneath them was reliable in a way that the ground beneath most people simply is not. This quality has been called different things by different traditions: equanimity, composure, inner freedom, stillness. But across the philosophical traditions that have thought most carefully about it, there is a consistent recognition that it is not a personality trait that some people are born with and others are not. It is a discipline, something developed through deliberate practice, through the kind of patient, sustained inner work that produces a quality of mind that is genuinely harder to disturb than the mind that has not been through that work. Welcome to Night Wisdom Radio, Beneath the Stars. Tonight we explore what two great philosophical traditions, the worldly wisdom of Baltasar Gracián and the Stoic philosophy of Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, have to say about the art of self-possession, the cultivation of that stable, reliable, unshakable inner ground from which clear action and genuine freedom become possible. The Stoics and Gracián came from very different worlds and thought about human life in somewhat different registers. The Stoics, who flourished in ancient Greece and Rome over several centuries spanning roughly 300 BCE to 200 CE, were fundamentally concerned with the question of what constitutes a good life, with how a person could achieve genuine flourishing and genuine freedom in the face of a world that is often indifferent to human wishes and frequently hostile to human comfort. Gracián, writing in 17th century Spain, was more specifically concerned with how a person of ability and integrity could navigate the complex social world of his time, the courts, the institutions, the webs of influence and perception that determined who rose and who fell. But at the center of both traditions, there is a shared recognition that I want to draw out tonight, because it is the most important thing that either of them ever said. That the quality of a person's outer life, their effectiveness, their freedom, their capacity to act with real authority, is ultimately determined by the quality of their inner life, and specifically by the degree of sovereignty they have developed over their own minds. The Stoic philosopher who had been a slave, and who is therefore perhaps the most striking example of someone who developed inner freedom under conditions of radical outer constraint, articulated the foundational principle of the whole Stoic tradition in a form that cuts like a blade. Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions and fancies they form about those things. What Epictetus meant, and what the Stoics meant generally, is that the disturbance we experience is never simply the direct product of what happens to us, It is the product of the judgment we make about what happens to us, the meaning we assign to it, the story we tell about it, the conclusion we draw about what it implies for our safety, our worth, our future. And that judgment, that interpretation, is ours. It is not given to us by circumstances. It is produced by our own minds, according to the habits of thought we have developed deliberately or by default over the course of our lives. Gracián arrived at a closely related insight through a different path, not through philosophical argument, but through patient observation of what actually worked in the complicated social world he inhabited. He noticed that the people who moved through that world most effectively, who maintained their clarity and their judgment under pressure, who were not easily provoked, manipulated, or thrown off course, shared a quality that he described in different places as composure, as self-possession, as the sovereignty of the rational mind over the impulses that would otherwise govern it. And he believed, as the Stoics believed, that this quality was not temperamental, not a gift of nature, but something that could be deliberately built through specific practices applied with consistency over time. What are those practices? The first practice, foundational to both traditions, is what we might call the cultivation of the observing self. Both Epictetus and Gracián, in their different ways, pointed toward the importance of developing a capacity for self-observation, not the critical, judgmental self-monitoring of someone who is perpetually anxious about whether they are performing correctly, but the calm, clear witnessing of one's own inner states from a place of some distance. The observing self is the part of you that can notice, I am feeling angry right now, without being consumed by the anger, that can register, I am afraid, without being commanded by the fear, that can watch the motion of its own inner weather without being identical to that weather. Epictetus described this as the development of the faculty he called Prohairesis, the power of choice, the distinctly human capacity to place a conscious step between stimulus and response, between what arrives from outside and what proceeds from inside. Gracián described the same capacity as the mastery of the first impulse, the discipline of not allowing the first wave of reaction to become action, of letting the initial surge pass through you before deciding what, if anything, it warrants. Both men understood this as the master practice, the one from which all other forms of self-possession flow, because once you can observe your own inner states without being identical to them, you have created the space in which genuine choice becomes possible. The second practice is what the Stoics called the premeditation of adversity. And it is perhaps the most misunderstood of all Stoic practices, because it can sound on the surface like a counsel of pessimism. The Stoics, and Marcus Aurelius in particular, recommended the regular, deliberate contemplation of difficulty, not as a way of inducing anxiety, and not out of any grim preoccupation with suffering, but as a specific practice for reducing the power that unexpected difficulty has over the mind. The logic is straightforward once you see it. Most of the disturbance that adverse events produce in us comes not from the events themselves, but from their unexpectedness, from the gap between the reality we assumed and the reality that arrived. The mind that has considered, calmly and in advance the range of difficulties that a given situation might produce, that has sat quietly with the possibility of loss, of failure, of disappointment, of circumstances not going as planned, is a mind that is genuinely less disturbed when those things occur, because they have already been, in some sense, inhabited. Marcus Aurelius practiced this not as a morbid exercise, but as a form of mental preparation, the same way an athlete might mentally rehearse the most demanding scenarios their sport could produce, not to dwell in them, but to arrive at the actual moment with a mind that has already found its footing. Gracián's version of this practice was slightly different in its emphasis, less concerned with adversity in the abstract and more concerned with the specific social difficulties that any person of ambition and integrity would inevitably encounter: betrayal, ingratitude, envy, the misreading of intentions. He recommended what we might call a sober realism about human nature, not cynicism, not the bitter conclusion that people are fundamentally untrustworthy, but a clear-eyed recognition that human beings are complicated, that their interests do not always align with yours, and that the person who has accepted this and built their equanimity on a foundation that does not require other people to behave perfectly is far more stable than the person who has not. The third practice that emerges from both traditions is what we might call the discipline of enough. One of the most consistent observations in both Stoic philosophy and in Gracián's work is that a significant portion of human unhappiness and a significant portion of the vulnerability that allows us to be disturbed comes from the habit of making our contentment dependent on conditions outside our control. When your sense of well-being depends on other people's approval, any disapproval has the power to destabilize you. When it depends on a particular outcome, any failure of that outcome becomes a genuine threat to your inner peace. When it depends on circumstances remaining as you prefer them, every change in circumstance is experienced as loss. Both traditions point toward the same practice: the gradual, deliberate work of locating the source of your contentment closer to the center, in the quality of your own choices, in the integrity of your own conduct, in the nature of your own attention, and further from the periphery, where the things you cannot control reside. This is not an argument for indifference to outcomes or to other people. It is an argument for a different kind of relationship with them, one in which you care deeply about the external world while remaining fundamentally unbreakable by it. When you bring Gracián and the Stoics together around this theme, what emerges is a picture of the self-possessed person that is both more realistic and more achievable than either tradition alone provides. The Stoics offer the philosophical foundation, the understanding of where genuine freedom lies, the practices for cultivating the observing self, and the realism about human impermanence and variability that prevents unnecessary suffering. Gracián offers the practical application, the specific skills for navigating the human world, for reading situations clearly, managing timing intelligently, protecting the inner life from unnecessary exposure, and building the kind of reputation and relationships that give the self-possessed person effective leverage in the world they are actually inhabiting. Together, they describe something like a complete philosophy of being a human being who is both deeply free and effectively engaged with the world, who has done the inner work to remain unshakable, while also doing the outer work to move with skill and purpose. Before we close tonight, I want to offer a practice that synthesizes what we have explored from both traditions, something you can carry into the days ahead and return to whenever the quality of your self-possession feels like it needs tending. The practice has two parts, and they are designed to be used together. The first part comes from the Stoics. At the beginning of each day, before the demands of the world arrive, take 2 minutes to sit quietly and ask yourself one question. What might challenge my composure today, and what is the quality of response I want to bring to it? Not a detailed plan, not a strategic calculation, just a moment of honest anticipation, so that the day's difficulties arrive into a mind that has already, in some sense, greeted them. The second part comes from Gracián. At the end of each day, in the quiet before sleep, ask yourself a different question. At the moments today when my composure was tested, did I respond from my best self or from my reactive self? And what, if anything, does the difference teach me? Not self-criticism. You are not trying to reproach yourself for the moments when the reactive self won. You are simply attending, with the calm interest of the observer, to the pattern, to where your self-possession holds and where it is still developing, so that tomorrow's morning question can be a little more precise, a little better aimed at the territory that actually needs the work. This is the practice, morning intention, evening reflection, that the self-possessed person lives inside, not as a burden or an obligation, but as a quiet, daily act of respect for the mind they are trying to build.
Night Wisdom Radio.
Tonight, we have explored where two great traditions of human wisdom converge on a single, enduring question. And I would love to hear where that exploration has taken you. Which of the three practices, the observing self, the premeditation of adversity, or the discipline of enough, feels most alive to you tonight? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every comment adds something genuine to this community. If tonight's episode brought you something of value, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe with notifications on, so the next reflection finds its way to you.